Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing, Magic, and Mysticism, here to talk to you about the occult and paranormal. Well, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about spiritualism. And I know that I've mentioned the term spiritualism and I've even went into a little bit of detail about what that is and what it entails, but I wanted to give kind of a fuller description in this particular video. Also, if you are interested in some of the videos that I've done before on, like for example, the Master Spirit Guide and the Joy Guide, those two ideas also fit into American spiritualism. So, pay close attention. All right, so spiritualism. So, let me start by saying that people have been talking to the dead since the time that we as a species were able to even contemplate our own death and have that awareness. And I'm also not talking about, when spiritualism, I'm not talking about some of the other flavors of speaking with the dead, which would be things like Spiritismo and Spiritism. I'm talking about spiritualism, which is actually an American tradition. It's a religion that started in the United States around in the 1850s and became popular a few decades later. So when I'm talking about spiritualism, I'm talking about an American religion devoted to contacting departed loved ones and spirit guides for healing, wisdom, and spiritual progression. Now, before I get started, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the history of spiritualism. And it did not have a very positive start. It takes us back to the 1850s in Hydesville, New York, where we had three sisters who claimed that they were communicating with the dead. And the way that this worked was that they were in their house, as the story goes, and they heard knocks on the door and walls and all these other different places. And so they thought that they were being communicated with a ghost. So they started asking questions to these knocks, and through their communications, they developed a system, which I guess would be kind of like an auditory Ouija board type of thing, where, two knocks might mean a yes and one knock might be a no. And through that, they were able to find out about this particular spirit and to gain knowledge of the future and various other things. Now, this caused a stir. Think about what the climate was. This was very, United States, of course, is a Christian country and is very much, governed by the Bible and all these types of things. So there are a lot of admonitions about communicating with spirits and things like that. So this caused a lot of attention, and over time, these girls became more popular, and they actually made a living off of this type of phenomena. Later, the psychical researchers of the day started to spot some things that were unusual and started to actually, put in there that, this is kind of suspicious. And, of course, later on, they recanted that this was not spirits, that this was a kind of a hoax, and that it was fraudulent messages that they were creating. They were very clever girls, and they actually fooled, a good majority of the people of that day. But they're still known as the Fox Sisters, who are the first manifestations of interest, beginning of popularity of speaking with the dead in the United States at that time. So it started out under these kind of shady type of circumstances. But what happened, because sometimes something good can come from something not so good, what this did was that it rekindled the American citizens, their interest in the occult and in the possible ability to communicate with those who are deceased. Okay, so from when that sort of movement started, they had people who genuinely had mediumistic abilities, who generally could speak with spirits, coming out because now they really had permission to do so, because this was something that was becoming more fashionable. And of course, on the other end, you have the people who are hucksters and people who do hoaxes, charlatans, all these different type of people who are just trying to make money, and they were actually creating fake seances, and they were creating these they were creating these setups where, it was completely false, which isn't a good thing, because it gives anytime you have these people in any type of area of study or profession, it kind of can give them a bad name if there's enough of them. So you had people like Houdini, who was a magician, one of the greatest magicians, coming in and actually catching some of these charlatans and some of their fake media seances and some of their fake expressions of spirit phenomena, and exposing them. On the other hand, you had people who, with genuine interest, people who were artists and writers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, the author of Sherlock Holmes, who actually was really good at spiritualistic phenomena and became a leader of a spiritualist organization. Not many people know that. So, time progressed. But just to give you a sense of how popular this was, because you had people who were part of other religions who were actually, in a way, converting to spiritualism. You had the hundreds of thousands of people who were into this. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't sound like a lot of people, but, the population of the United States was much less than it is now. So you had maybe 30 million people in the United States, as opposed to, I'm not sure what is 325 million, I think, at the present moment. So that is a bigger representation. In any case, it became so popular that Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary were hosting seances in the White House. There was at least 2 documented seances. Now, in their case, and I think it may be true in some cases, is that there is a lot of grief associated with the drive to seek the services of a medium. Their child died of, I think, typhoid fever, I want to say, and Mary wanted to communicate with her deceased child. And as a backdrop, if you're interested in the kind of the sociological aspect of spiritualism, think about what was going on at this time. So you have people U.S. citizens, who are dying in the Civil War. There are massive amounts of death under violent circumstances. You have loved ones who have lost these people, and they're grieving, and they want some type of closure, and they are missing these soldiers, and they want to communicate with them. Not to mention is that, okay, so we're dealing with this time period where we didn't even have adequate medicine to combat a lot of the illnesses and diseases of that time. I don't think that there were even any. The first vaccines, I want to say, came into the 1940s for diseases. Major diseases like, I think MMR came in maybe the 50s and 60s. They didn't really even have good antibiotics. I'm not sure antibiotics was discovered or accessible into maybe the 1940s or 50s. So you have people dying of just non-war related things who were dying, and you have people left behind. So this pretty much was a good setup for this particular movement, which later became a religion. So later on, as time progresses, A few decades later, you have the invention of the Ouija board. Okay, so I think the Ouija board didn't actually start out as a divining tool until, in the beginning, it was more like a parlor game, kind of like you know, early like childhood games like Monopoly and Candyland and stuff like that. It wasn't taken seriously, is what I'm saying, until around the 1890s, I think, that it became a little bit more people using it for those particular purposes. Now, of course, talking boards have been around a while, but the Ouija board as we know it, William Fuld, Oracle, later Parker Brothers and Hasbro, didn't actually occur until the late 1800s, early 1900s. Right. Okay. So if you think about the Ouija board, people have been texting the spirit world since far before that cell phones were invented. Okay, so let's fast forward into modern day spiritualism, because it may not be something that you hear about too often, but it's still there. It hasn't gone away. In World War I, it became more popular, again, as a resurgence. That's really when Ouija boards really started to take off. Again, what do we have? We have another war. We don't have a Civil War, but we have World War I, where we have people, again, massive amount of casualties. Friends, relatives, experiencing loss. And as part of that drive, they want to communicate with their loved ones because they have unfinished business. And they still have that emotional attachment. Fast forward a little bit further. We have the modern spiritualist church. Okay. And as a side note, I do have some personal experience in this particular area. In the 90s, for several years, I was part of a local spiritualist church in my area. And it was actually a really good experience. We had psychic development classes on Thursday. We had the actual service on Sunday. Now, if you're curious about what a service might be for the spiritualists, it would consist of, once we kind of started the service on Sunday, we would start with an inspirational reading, which would have some thoughts and contemplations, reflections about the spirit world. Usually it's somebody who was an early spiritualist. We would talk about it, discuss the readings. Second part, we would do kind of a healing service where we would put in the names of people who needed healing, and then we would ask the spirit world and the source to help those people. Third, which I always found was the most fun and the most interesting, which would be the actual message service. So in a circle, we would have people who did have the skills and abilities to speak to spirit guides and to departed loved ones, to actually give messages to other members. And after that, then that was kind of the close of the service. So it was, like I said, a really good experience. I suggest that if anybody has a spiritualist church in their area and they're interested in communicating with spirits, that might be something to check out. The group of people that I dealt with were very positive, loving, warm, and genuine. You can tell when you have that in a particular circle or particular group. They were not people who were trying to fake anything or like kind of some of the early things that I was talking about. They were really people who were interested, and they were devoted and passionate about their particular religion. So where does everything stand right now? Well, they have another option for you, is they have several spiritualist camps around the United States. So these are places where you can go if you want to get readings, They're like little communities. Uh, you can go there. You can get readings. You can take classes. You can even train to be spiritualist minister over a period of time, over several months or years of training. You can kind of have your own church. And it's, as far as what I understand, very thorough training, and there are multiple tests, and you have to prove your salt as far as your ability to communicate with spirits and guides. And you will be checked on by the other mediums of that community. What I like about these particular places are in the very rural areas, very nature-oriented. A lot of them are designed and feel like late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of them don't have TVs. I know Lilydale especially. It is very sparse and very minimalist in nature. The whole community is designed around this particular activity, which I think is pretty interesting, pretty cool. I have plans to go visit one of them, which I'll mention in a second, in the near future. They're kind of like retreats. So the three most popular ones are Camp Chesterfield in Indiana. That's the one that the church I was associated with is connected to. There is Lilydale in New York, which I believe is the oldest one. Then there is Cassadaga in Florida. So look those up if you live in those areas. Maybe you might want to stop by. And there's a couple other ones around that are lesser known, I think are a little smaller. So in any event, I wanted to kind of share that information with you. This is part of our history, our American history, even though I don't remember reading much about it in our history books in high school, so it was something that I actually had to look up several years ago. So if you're interested, do some of your own research. Let me know what you think, and please subscribe and like, and I will see you in a future video.